7 days after moving into our dream house, I received a phone call from a stranger that made my entire body go cold. It was the previous owner of our home, and the first thing she said was, "Don't tell your husband I called. Come alone." I almost laughed because it sounded impossible, but then she whispered 5 words that made me drop my phone. "I saw what he did." At that moment, the beautiful house I thought represented a fresh beginning suddenly felt like it was hiding a terrible secret, and I had no idea that opening one door would change everything. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 29 years old, and for most of my adult life, I believed that owning a home was something that happened to other people. I grew up watching families decorate their houses for holidays, paint walls together, and create memories in places they could call their own. For me, that dream always felt just a little too far away. But after years of saving every extra dollar, skipping vacations, and making sacrifices, my husband Daniel and I finally reached that moment. We bought our first house. I still remember the day we got the keys. I stood in the empty living room, holding that small metal key in my hand, and I couldn't stop smiling. Sunlight came through the windows, the floors were polished, and the backyard was bigger than anything I had imagined. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Daniel wrapped his arms around me and said, "Can you believe we actually did it?" And at that moment, I truly believed we were stepping into the happiest chapter of our lives. Daniel had always been the person I trusted most. He was the kind of husband who remembered small details, who brought me coffee when I was tired, and who made me believe that I had finally found someone who would always stand beside me. That was why the strange feeling I had during those first few days confused me. The house was beautiful, but there were little things that didn't make sense. A small basement door near the laundry room was locked, and Daniel casually said the previous owner probably forgot to leave the key. There were security cameras already installed around the property, which I thought was a nice bonus. But when I asked Daniel about them, he quickly changed the subject and said we could deal with them later. I didn't think much of it. Moving is stressful. Buying a house is stressful. I told myself I was just overwhelmed. For the first week, we were busy unpacking boxes, arranging furniture, and imagining our future there. I took pictures of every room because I wanted to remember the feeling of starting over. I had no idea that 7 days after moving in, a phone call from the previous owner would make me question everything I thought I knew about my husband. 7 days after we moved into our new house, I was sitting at the kitchen counter sorting through unopened mail when my phone started ringing. I didn't recognize the number. It was from Illinois, and for a few seconds I almost ignored it. I thought it might be some random sales call or an old account notification. But something inside me told me to answer. "Hello." There was a brief silence on the other end. Then a woman's voice said, "Is this Emily Carter?"
Yes.
"Who is this?" "My name is Linda. I used to own your house." My hand froze around my coffee mug. At first, I thought she was calling about something simple. Maybe paperwork. Maybe mail that had accidentally been sent to the wrong address. But then her voice changed. She sounded nervous. "I need you to listen carefully," she said. "I forgot to disconnect one of the cameras before I sold the house." I looked toward the living room where one of the security cameras was mounted in the corner. "What do you mean?" "I mean I could still access it after you moved in."
My heart started beating faster.
Then she said the words I still remember clearly. "I saw something you need to know." A cold feeling moved through my body. I glanced toward the hallway, almost expecting Daniel to appear. "What did you see?" There was another pause. Then Linda whispered, "Don't tell your husband I called you. Please. Come meet me alone." Every instinct in me wanted to ask Daniel immediately. He was my husband, the person I shared everything with, the person I was supposed to trust. But something about Linda's fear stopped me. Why shouldn't I tell him? Because if I'm wrong, you lose nothing. But if I'm right, you need time to understand what's happening before he knows you found out. Those words stayed in my mind all day. I met Linda that afternoon at a quiet cafe about 20 minutes from my house. She looked nothing like the person I had imagined. She wasn't angry or dramatic. She looked like someone carrying a heavy secret. After we sat down, she opened her phone and took a deep breath. "Emily," she said softly, "before I sold this house, Your husband came here several times without telling you." I stared at her.
What?
Linda turned her phone toward me. And the moment I saw the screen, I felt like the entire world had shifted beneath my feet. I stared at Linda's phone, but my brain refused to process what I was seeing. On the screen was a video from the security camera outside our house. The timestamp was from 3 weeks before we officially moved in. Before the closing date. Before I had ever stepped inside that home as the owner. And there was Daniel, standing in my new living room. I looked at Linda, waiting for her to explain something that would make this all feel normal. Maybe there was a misunderstanding. Maybe Daniel had simply visited the house for some reason related to paperwork. Maybe there was an innocent explanation. But deep down, I already felt the answer forming. Why was he here? I asked. Linda lowered her eyes for a moment. That's what I wanted to know. She explained that after the sale was finalized, she noticed unusual activity through the camera system. At first, she assumed it was a technical issue. But then she saw Daniel entering the house with someone else. Someone I immediately recognized. His mother. My stomach tightened. Daniel had always told me his mother barely cared about our lives. He said she was too busy with her own problems to get involved. But there she was. Inside our house. Before we even owned it. Linda pressed play again. This time, the audio was clearer. I watched as Daniel and his mother walked through the rooms, stopping near the basement door. The same locked basement door I had noticed after moving in. They weren't looking around like buyers. They weren't admiring the house. They were searching. I felt a strange combination of anger and confusion. Why would my husband search through a house we hadn't even moved into yet? What was he looking for? Linda leaned closer and said, "At first, I thought maybe he was checking something for the purchase. But then I heard parts of their conversation." "What did they say?" She hesitated. "They were talking about you." The room suddenly felt smaller. My husband and his mother had been inside our future home, having conversations I was never supposed to hear. Linda told me she didn't want to jump to conclusions. She didn't know exactly what they were planning, but she knew something felt wrong. Then she opened another file on her phone.
"There's one more thing," she said.
I looked at the screen. It was a photo of something hidden inside the house. Something Daniel clearly didn't know she had found. And the moment I saw it, I realized this wasn't just about a secret meeting. It was about something much bigger. I looked at the picture Linda had shown me, trying to understand what I was seeing. It was a small metal box hidden behind a loose wooden panel in the basement. A place I had never noticed. A place Daniel had clearly been searching for. "Where did you find this?" I asked. Linda took a slow breath. "Before I sold the house, I was cleaning out the basement. I found that panel accidentally. Behind it was a small compartment with this box inside." My fingers tightened around my coffee cup. What was in it? Documents. That one word made my heart sink. Linda explained that when she first opened the box, she found old property records, financial papers, and letters connected to the previous owners. At first, she thought it was just forgotten paperwork. But then she noticed something strange. Some of the documents were related to a dispute involving the property years ago. And somehow, Daniel knew about them. "How would my husband know about something hidden in your house?" I asked. Linda looked at me carefully. That's the question I couldn't answer. She explained that during the home sale process, Daniel had been unusually interested in certain details. He asked questions that seemed harmless at first. Questions about the basement. Questions about old renovations. Questions about whether any original documents were left behind. Linda said she didn't think much of it because buyers often ask strange questions. But after seeing him enter the house before the closing and watching him search that basement area, everything started making sense. For the first time since I met her, Linda looked almost apologetic. "I should have told you sooner," she said. "But I didn't want to interfere in your marriage without knowing the truth." I appreciated her honesty, but my mind was racing. Suddenly, small moments from the past started replaying in my head. The way Daniel became overly excited when we found this house. The way he insisted this was the perfect property. The way he avoided answering questions about the basement. Things I had ignored because I trusted him. I had spent years believing trust meant never doubting the person you loved. But sitting across from Linda, I realized something painful. Sometimes trust can make you blind. Before I left the cafe, Linda reached across the table and held my hand. Emily, don't confront him yet. Why? Because if he knows you found out, you may never discover the full truth. Those words followed me all the way home. That night, I walked through the house I had dreamed about owning. But for the first time, it didn't feel like my home. It felt like a place where someone had been hiding something from me. That night, I barely slept. I lay beside Daniel, listening to his breathing, while thousands of questions ran through my mind. How long had he known about the documents? Why did he keep this from me? And the question that hurt the most, what else had he been hiding? The hardest part was pretending everything was normal. The next morning, Daniel kissed my forehead and asked if I slept well. I smiled and said yes. But inside, I felt like I was living with a stranger. I remembered Linda's advice. Don't confront him yet. So instead of asking questions, I started looking for answers. While Daniel was at work, I went back into the basement. I had walked past that area dozens of times since moving in, but now I looked at everything differently. I checked the walls, the shelves, and the corners where old boxes were stacked. Eventually, I noticed something unusual behind a group of storage containers. There was a small gap in the wall. My hands started shaking. I moved the containers aside and found a loose wooden panel. Behind it was the same hidden space Linda had mentioned. Inside was another envelope. My name wasn't on it, but the contents inside changed everything. There were copies of emails between Daniel and his mother. I sat on the basement floor reading every message, hoping I had misunderstood. But I hadn't. They had been discussing the house for months before I even knew it was for sale. They knew about the hidden documents. They knew there could be something valuable connected to the property. And the worst part was that they planned to keep me completely unaware. One message from Daniel's mother made my heart break. It said, "Emily trusts you. She won't question anything." I stared at those words for what felt like hours. Because she was right. I trusted him. I trusted the person who was supposed to protect me. The house was never just about buying a home. It was about what they believed they could get from it. I called Linda again and told her what I found. There was silence on the phone. Then she quietly said, "Emily, I was afraid this was what was happening." She helped me organize everything I had discovered. The messages, the documents, the timeline, every piece of evidence. For the first time since that mysterious phone call, I felt like I had control again. I wasn't just the person being lied to anymore. I was someone who knew the truth. And I was ready to find out exactly how far my husband's betrayal went. For 2 days, I carried the truth silently. Every conversation with Daniel felt different because I knew something he didn't know. I knew about the messages. I knew about the hidden documents. I knew about the conversations he thought I would never discover. And strangely, the hardest part wasn't the anger. It was the disappointment. I kept thinking about the man who held my hand when we got those house keys. The man who promised we were building a future together. How could the same person secretly plan something that could destroy my trust? Finally, I decided I couldn't live with the pretending anymore. That evening, when Daniel came home, I placed the documents on the kitchen table.
He looked at them.
Then he looked at me, and I watched the color slowly leave his face. "Emily, where did you get these?" That question told me everything. He didn't ask what they were. He didn't ask why I had them. He asked where I found them. "You knew about this house before we bought it," I said quietly. Daniel immediately shook his head. "It's not what you think." I almost laughed, because that was exactly what people said when it was exactly what you thought.
He tried to explain.
He said he was only investigating the property because he believed there could be important information connected to it. He said he wanted to protect our future. But every explanation created another question. "Then why didn't you tell me?" Silence. That silence hurt more than any excuse. A few minutes later, his mother arrived. Apparently, Daniel had called her because he knew he couldn't explain everything alone. The moment she walked through the door, I saw it. She wasn't surprised. She was prepared. That was when I realized this wasn't something Daniel had done by himself. They both believed they could control the situation. They believed I would never find out. I placed the emails on the table and calmly explained everything I knew. For once, nobody interrupted me. Nobody changed the subject. Nobody made me feel like I was imagining things. Daniel finally admitted that he had hidden information because he thought the outcome would benefit us financially. But money wasn't what broke me. It was the fact that he made a decision about our life without trusting me enough to be part of it. I looked at him and said the one thing I had been holding back. A marriage cannot be built on secrets, even if you convince yourself they are for a good reason. And in that moment, I knew the house wasn't the thing that was falling apart. Our trust was. After that night, nothing felt the same. The house that was supposed to represent the beginning of our future became the place where I finally saw the truth about my marriage. For weeks, I had to make difficult decisions. I had to separate my emotions from reality and ask myself a question I never thought I would ask. Could I still build a life with someone who chose secrecy over honesty? Daniel apologized many times. He said he regretted hiding things from me. He said he never wanted to hurt me, and maybe part of him believed that. But I learned something important. Intentions do not erase consequences. Someone can believe they are doing something for the right reasons and still break the trust of the person they love. With time, Daniel and I went through counseling and many difficult conversations. We talked about why he made those choices and why he thought keeping me in the dark was acceptable. But rebuilding trust was not something that happened because of a few apologies. Trust is rebuilt through actions, through honesty, through consistency, and most importantly, through respecting the other person enough to include them in decisions that affect their life. The former owner, Linda, remained someone I was incredibly grateful for. She was a stranger who had no reason to get involved in my life. But when she saw something that felt wrong, she chose to warn me. Sometimes the person who protects you is not always the person you expect. Months later, I stood in the same basement where I had discovered the hidden documents. But this time, I didn't feel afraid. I realized that the house itself was never the problem. The house didn't betray me. The walls didn't hide anything from me.
People did.
And although discovering the truth was painful, it also gave me something valuable. A chance to stop living with a false version of my life. A chance to choose what kind of future I wanted. I still live in that house today, but it feels different now. Not because the memories disappeared, but because I reclaimed the space for myself. I learned that a dream home is not created by expensive furniture, perfect rooms, or beautiful decorations. A real home is built on honesty, respect, and trust. And sometimes the most unexpected warning comes from the person you least expect. That phone call from Linda changed my life. At first, I thought it was the beginning of a nightmare. But looking back now, I realize it was the moment I finally woke up.